I'd like to welcome everyone to the Public Safety Veterans Subcommittee. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I believe we have Councilmember Pastor on the phone. Is that right? Laura, are you on the phone? I guess not. Alrighty. With that, I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes of January 13th.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It passes. What we're going to do is we're going to move item number 7 up front out of order, and then we'll have public comment afterwards. Can we have presiding judge up? All yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. It's my pleasure to be here today to talk about the reappointment process of 5 of our judges. As you're well aware, our Judicial Selection Advisory Board has gone through the process of interviewing all 5 of them and looking in depth at how they've performed on the bench and have unanimously recommended reappointment of all 5 of them to you. Let me add my own personal recommendation there, if I might. I have worked with all 5 of these judicial officers in various capacities for many years, and I can, without any hesitation, recommend that you reappoint all 5 of them to another 4-year term of service on the municipal court bench. These 5 individuals bring 5 unique sets of experiences, skills, perspectives, and in my opinion, our bench is richer for having each of them on it. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have, as I'm sure would they, but at this point I would defer to the chair.
I'm not sure if there's any questions or comments or a motion from.
I'd make, actually, I appreciate your comments. We have interviewed most of these judges 2 or 3 times and have always found them to be outstanding candidates. So I have a motion to make the recommendation to the full council for the reappointment of Phoenix Municipal Court judges for a new 4-year term as follows. Francisca Cota to 12/2019, Cynthia Gonzalez to 12/2019, James P. Hernandez 12/2019, Walter L. Jackson to 11/25/19, and James Sampanas to 11/25/19.
Second.
Alrighty, we have a motion and a second. Any comments? I just have a comment is that I just want to make sure that everybody out there watching it on television, we get these reports from each of the judges on their performance. And these are individuals, as Councilmember Williams has stated, has approached us already a couple times with the interview process, and that I feel very comfortable supporting the motion from Councilmember Williams after reading the report and their evaluations. And once again, congratulations and thank you for making the Phoenix court system one of the best in the country. With that, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? It passes. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
At this time, we'll take the public comment. We have about several cards. Oh, I'm sorry, Arthur Garcia, did you want to, I'm so sorry, Arthur, I jumped you, but if you'd like to say something regarding the judges. Would you, yeah.
Yes. I'm slightly hard of hearing, so.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's all right. I would like, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I was surprised to learn that we have 23 judges on the city court. You know, there are only 23 justices of the peace precincts in Maricopa County. They have the whole county. We only have the city of Phoenix, and yet we have 23 judges, and they have 23 judges. Plus, they have civil jurisdiction, which this court does not. I'm amazed also that they're paid the same as Superior Court judges, unless that has changed. That's a couple of years old. If I was a Superior Court judge, I would demand a 50% pay raise. I just cannot believe that we pay them the same. City courts are a criminal misdemeanor court where 90% of the cases, that figure changes, or more, are pled. And the city court is not a trial court, it's a sentencing court, and normally the sentence is part of the plea. So even the sentence is determined by the prosecutor in most of these cases. Civil traffic violations are not handled by the city court judge. I believe they're handled by some civil traffic officer. The city courts have become a collection agency. I hope that everybody read this article, how a $95 ticket can grow. I thought it was an excellent article and has an outstanding comment by our council member, Kate Gallego. I recommend that we should consider city court reform, both as to pay, numbers, and their functions. The city,
Garcia, on the agenda, we're talking about reappointment of the judges, so if you can keep on that subject.
right, okay, I got one final comment. I realize that you might say that. The city court should not be funding state and county governments. Of course, to really change that practice, we have to look at the state legislature and see if they can do something statutorily. But the city has to undertake some steps to do that. Of course, I have no objection to the reappointment of the judges. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. And one of the things is that if we can maybe get a report on the caseload compared to Supreme Court judges and our own Phoenix Court judges, and kind of figure that out ourselves too, right? Alrighty, and then the other point, we're trying to figure out that way that we don't have to pay all that surplus taxes to the state and the county. It's more than double. So exactly what that article talks about. There's a $100 fine. It can go up to over $210 in service fees that we as a city have to apply to those fees.
We
So
actually had that item on this on this agenda of this subcommittee. I think that was one of the things that inspired the article, but it does feel painful for us to be funding the State Department of Public Safety when we need more money for public safety here in Phoenix, and we couldn't agree more, I think.
Exactly.
So the state legislature imposes those on us. We do not go out looking to fund their government.
So thank you, Mr. Garcia, for bringing that up. We agree with you 100%. We're on public comment, our call to the public. We have Beverly. Is there a?
Yeah.
Is there a Beverly? Come on down, we're on call to the public. And just as you're making your way up, call to the public is that we can't respond, but you can bring concerns to the subcommittee.
Yes,
and
my
then we can
concern-
address later on in the
Excuse
future.
me?
That basically, when it's called to the public, we can't address you on those concerns, but we can put it on a future agenda item to talk about that, right?
Future agenda items?
Right.
You can't
So-
address my concern today?
We can't talk back to you on regarding those concerns,
Mm-hmm.
but then we can actually put it on the agenda if we feel that, in a future agenda item, and then it
All
could
I
be
want is
more
a
of a-
travel voucher out of the state. Can you
All
guys
right.
do that?
Well, go ahead, it's all yours. I just want to make very clear what's going on.
But can you guys do that, a travel voucher out of the state?
Thank you, ma'am. All right, next would be JJ Johnson.
Council members, good morning. Last week, a Phoenix police officer deployed a canine on the wrong person. According to the news report, they were looking for an armed robbery suspect, and they didn't get immediate verbal compliance, and so a police canine was deployed on a person living with Down syndrome. At what point is this council going to demand that use of force be a last resort rather than a first option. If this city manager is not going to reform the police department, you need to replace him, or we will replace you. If you can't manage to replace the city manager, we will replace you. Each of you will see primary opponents. This is shameful. The vacuum of leadership is shameful. You have good officers who are not being well led. It is time to reform this police department. It was one of the most lethal departments because the way that we are telling our officers to go out every day is the wrong way to do it. Period. It's time to change. Let's make it happen.
Mr. Johnson, thank you very much. You can ask Milton, maybe you can follow up with that information and finding out that incident that he talked about, or if you can have somebody. Thank you very much. Next would be Mr. Woods.
Hello. Just want to first say hats off to Councilwoman Williams for coming out with Mayor Stanton and calling for body cameras for the Phoenix Police. So I do want to commend you on that. I did want, last time we were here, we made public comments. We were told that the CPTI would be on this month's agenda. It is not. I heard it was going to be on March now. But it's really concerning to me the level of opacity that this CPTI has had. I mean, according to someone who's on the CPTI, for a task force that starts with the word community, the public had no idea that it had been created. After we were assigned to the task force, we were told that the process would be closed to the public, that we would not be allowed to have any open meetings or to speak to anyone outside the committee about its process, discussion, or decisions. I don't understand why it has to be such a secret what's on this CPTI. Why this was finished in November, and Zerker's had plenty of time to do this. So I'm calling on City Council to let's get this done. You know, why aren't we talking about it today? What was the holdup? Why is it not on today's agenda? And why has there been no communication between the community when it's called the Community Police Trust Initiative? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. And just for information only, we will be having it on our next Public Safety Subcommittee agenda. Thank you. We have Francisca.
Good morning. My name is Francisca Porchas. I'm also here to express some frustration. I was under the impression, I even saw the video from last month, that we were going to be hearing about the CPTI's report from City Manager Zerker and Assistant City Manager Dohoney. That's clearly not happening today, which is frustrating given that we have a crisis happening. And to continue delaying this process is alarming and concerning. And the second thing is that I think Adriana Garcia Maximiliano's op-ed made it really clear. We need an open process. So not only do we need to hear from both city managers, but we also need to ensure that this committee next month takes a position, creates a motion so that they go out to every single precinct and have a public forum and actually get feedback from the community. I have no idea really who the individuals on CPTI are besides Adriana, the only one I really know and trust. But that is not enough given the crisis and given how much racial profiling, brutality, murder we've taken from the department. And that feedback comes back to this committee, that there's an actual discussion in front of the public, that there's a vote, and that then it goes to the city council. Essentially, we saw through a tweet that Loretta Lynch is coming, and I find it shocking in a lot of ways because we know that the department has killed so many people and brutalized so many that they're going to get a pat in the back from Loretta Lynch. So to us, I think a really important step forward in you all taking leadership in rebuilding some level, attempting to rebuild some level of trust with this department, is that you make this an open process, that you make this a vote, that you seem actually invested in reforming this department and invested in actually having the community trust both your leadership around reforming this department and the department itself. So I hope that that's loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Francisca, for bringing up those points. Mrs. Woods?
I want to thank Assistant Chief Michael Kurtenbach for around July 11th issuing a referral for proposal which would deploy 1,210 cameras on the street for uniformed officers on or about July 1st in conjunction with the new fiscal year. I want to thank Mayor Stanton and Councilwoman Thelda Williams, who on Monday asked that the new city budget allow for all of the city's patrol officers to wear body cameras in the next 3 years. It is not just a tool to reduce citizen complaints against officers, have more effective processing of cases in court, and improved evidence in the prosecution of domestic violence cases. It is a means of stopping the terror that Black and brown citizens live under in our city, of fear backed by statistics. The bottom line is that that these changes that body cameras bring will provide accountability necessary for families of fallen citizens. The website on The Guardian that tells the number of police killed nationally shows that Arizona had 4 so far in 2016. One in Phoenix. On January 1st, Levi Wilson, 39, at West Peoria and 19th Avenue, reportedly fired a gun inside his house. After there was a hours-long standoff during which he threatened to hurt himself. Police shot him after he left his house and then pointed a gun at himself and at the officers. Body cameras would have provided accountability for this family in our community, and this is when the real trust will grow between our community and the police. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Then we have also,
Mr. Chair, could I just make a quick comment?
absolutely.
I appreciate you saying that the mayor and I did the right thing, but I want to assure you that everybody on this committee strongly has made it very clear that they support body cameras. It's just budget time, and that's why that memo went out for a good reminder to this city manager. But I know everyone here has repeatedly said, as well as a couple other council people, how important getting the body cameras are.
Thank you, Council Member. We also have Carol.
Good morning, Chair Nowakowski and members of the subcommittee. My name is Carol Coles-Henry, and excuse me if I'm coughing because I'm fighting a cold. But I wanted to share with you, I understand there's been some previous discussions along with today in the call to the public around police trust and accountability and the work of the Community Police Trust Initiative. And as the co-chair with Julian Nabozny, we worked in 2015 for approximately 9 months. And I wanted to share with you that we had a very democratic and open process. Trust and accountability in police departments are essential to a vibrant city. And so Julian and I took our charge very seriously. I wanted to mention with you a few things: that we operated in one voice, that we had unity and consensus amongst all of our members and all of our voting processes in terms of our agenda setting, all the way to the various steps that we took in terms of technical expertise and reports that we brought in and engagement of our members. The task force was inclusive, diverse, transparent, engaging, reflecting the historical values of this city. We were progressive. We were focused on a city that has a strong commitment to community partnerships. I applaud City Manager Ed Zerker for assembling 17 people that I believe along with the leadership of Milton Dehoney and the police department, assembling 17 people that had over 150 years of experience, not only in civil rights, juvenile justice, community engagement, higher education, faith-based initiatives, diversity, disability, and the list goes on. We had young adults as well. I want to say that our voices reflected not only cultures, races, value, ages, and immigrants. Our 9-month journey was embedded in a very methodical framework based on best practices approaches, expert opinion, community input, face-to-face meetings, along with various network encounters. This is also embedded in national best practices on community engagement. We brought in local and national experts, and I'd like to end with a few points. Our members were charged to invite the community into the process through their own networks. We were our own community listening session with over 20 hours of dialogue. And next month, we plan to come back to you as a part of a presentation to this subcommittee, along with the good work of the first tier and second tier recommendations of the task force.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. And we have,
Buenos dias to all three of you. Just want to add to what Carol said, that we reached out to national experts to come in and help us. Also, the Department of Justice and the White House. We had communications with both of them and looking for the best sources. So everybody was included in this process. And we're very proud of the fact that gays, lesbians, Arabs, immigrants, Latinos, blacks, everybody was included in this process. Thank you so much. We'll see you in March.
thank you, Julian. And Julian did have a card. With that, call to the public is closed, and we'll go to item number 4. We have a card. Would you like to listen to the individual first? Alrighty, we have Mr. Garcia. It's item number 4.
President Nixon, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, President Nixon may have started the war on drugs, and President Reagan eliminated the white-collar criminal section or crime section unit in the U.S. Attorney's Office and established the Drug Enforcement Unit, to which all the assistants were transferred. In the early 1980s, cocaine sold for $50,000 a kilo wholesale. That's why they used small private planes, and they used Vietnam War veterans to fly them. 10 years ago, when I retired, cocaine sold for $5,000 per kilo wholesale. A large load 35 years ago was 200 kilos. Today, or at least 10 years ago, the large loads were in the thousands of kilos. Today, we still have a severe drug problem that also extends to Iowa and New Hampshire, according to the presidential debates. Maybe it was a mistake to give law enforcement forfeited drug proceeds. The funds may have been put to better use in programs such as Weed and Seed. We should have returned the money to the neighborhoods where it came from, repairing the damage caused by drugs. Senator Sanders may have been right when he said we should treat drug addiction as a medical problem and not a law enforcement problem. Legalization of marijuana will stop more money going to drug trafficking, drug cartels than would this anti-money laundering program. I'm in favor of this program if it caught the large-scale money launderers, but invariably it's a small guy that's arrested and imprisoned. There are enough minority males in prison already. 50% of all federal prisoners are in there for drug offenses, and America incarcerates more people than any other developed country in the world. Let's declare an end to the war on drugs and do something else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Right on time, too. Any comments or motions?
Move approval of item 4 and 5.
I like to pull out number 5 for some
Oh,
comments.
okay. All right. Then just number 4.
Alrighty. Is there a second on that?
Second, I guess I would like to just get perspective on whether we are targeting the little guys or really trying to make systemic change in this.
You can have somebody come up and address those issues.
Good morning, Council. I'm
You can actually come on up if you like.
Put you in the hot seat.
My name is Brent Vermeer. I'm the commander of the Drug Enforcement Bureau.
Hey, Commander, if you could press that button right in front of you. There's like a little speaker.
A lot of instructions here. Anything I'm missing? Again, my name is Brent Vermeer. I'm the commander of the Drug Enforcement Bureau with the Phoenix PD. In answer to the question regarding item number 4, this is a coalition of law enforcement involving Phoenix PD, DPS, the AG's office, and it's focusing the investigative efforts on the large-scale money launderers, the drug traffickers, the human traffickers. It has very little to do with the street-level sales, the small mom-and-pop shops as set up in the corner neighborhoods. We have a group that works specifically those type of level crimes. This is a much larger scale group that's moving billions of dollars, dirty dollars from Mexico, from America into Mexico. So in answer to the question, no, it's not a small scale operator focused funding initiative. This is large scale money laundering.
Any other follow-up questions?
Thank you, that answers my question.
Thank you.
All righty, with that, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. We have item number 5, if we can have it, and then if we can have our fire marshal come on up. So we're on item number 5 right now. Basically, I have a question is, when does this actually become effective?
We go to full council on March 2nd and then 30 days after that.
And how does this affect current projects that are approved already? Are they grandfathered in or?
Correct.
Okay. And so we don't have any type of adjustment or requirement to adjust their plans if it's already been approved prior to council's approval?
Correct.
Alrighty. That's all I needed to, any other questions?
Councilman Nowakowski and I represent the Levine area where agricultural and biomass fires have been a real issue. This makes some changes that will help us address those. Could you give us a little bit of an update on that?
We focused heavily on the biomass, which really targets a lot of the mulch facilities. And it was a result of the, what kicked it off was the fire in the Levine area. What we've done is we've made the mulch people more accountable for extinguishing their fires, which means they have to keep their piles lower. They have to have equipment present. They have to have contracts with companies that will provide them equipment if their equipment fails. That was one of the problems in the Levine fire, is they had equipment, but it ended up catching fire or breaking down. So the contract means there's a steady supply of that coming through. Pile heights, pile separations, some water source, and also their ability to have the area to move it out. We've learned through working with these individuals in this business that the best way to attack these fires is to lower piles, spread them out, then be able to cover them with water at that point, rather than standing back and pitching more water at it. So I think we've been very successful in this process. We're getting some accountability from these mulch companies, and the ones that don't want to become accountable have left the area.
Wonderful, because it was incredibly disruptive
We're getting there, though.
It was incredibly disruptive to our residents, and we had a lot of problems with respiratory illness, so this is
Yeah,
something.
it's a difficult area to deal with because it is a needed business. And so we're trying to work with those businesses so that they do it properly. And then we don't have the problems in the communities that your district has experienced Councilman Williams, your district has experienced.
We have partners in county islands. Could you speak to that? Because that is also, some of these mulch facilities are in county islands.
Yeah, there's not much we can do about that. We continue to work with, we have our inspectors sitting on committees that are bringing in all the other partners in the surrounding areas to discuss what they believe our practice is the best practice. So they're trying to get all the rest of the cities and county areas on board to conduct the same type of enforcement. So hopefully that will make a difference, but when they move to those county islands, and that's really what happens because our enforcement has become so much stricter. They are picking up and leaving and going to those county islands, and we don't have any impact on that other than these other places following us.
Okay, so maybe that's an action item for us as elected officials to reach out to our peers and share what we're doing in Phoenix in hopes that they will adopt the same practices?
I would recommend that. And additionally, what's happening is nationally and internationally, what we are doing is being adopted by those codes. So it is catching steam throughout the country with our process.
The Phoenix mulch process is being
Yes.
looked at internationally?
Yes.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's great news. And we will look forward to sharing this with our residents. Thank you.
Well, with that, already we have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
We're on item number 8 now. And it's an update on hiring of and recruiting of police officers.
Did you guys get my eye?
Yes, we did.
Standing up for fire safety, Councilwoman Pastor.
Yes.
It was like a voice from God.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. I'm Mike Kurtenbach. I have the honor of overseeing the Community Services Division for the Phoenix Police Department. And I'm going to be providing you an update this morning on the department's recruitment and hiring efforts. And it's important that you understand this is a very exciting time on the police department. Prior to being afforded the opportunity to hire again last year, the last class of Phoenix recruits to graduate from the Arizona Law Enforcement Academy did so in April of 2009. And one of the reasons that we are achieving the success that we're achieving today, and I'm hopeful you agree with me as I go through this presentation, is because of the work of our recruitment team. And several members of our recruitment team are here today, and I just want to take a moment to introduce them if they would stand up. They're led by Sergeant Troy Holland, Officer Liz Ruelas, and Officer Julio Cardenas, who selfishly, I will admit, I had the opportunity to work with in the Maryville Estrella Mountain Precinct, so I could speak to their character and their work ethic. And the whole unit is overseen by Lieutenant Tony Lopez, who's standing right there before them. You can sit down. Thank you. They do absolutely amazing work going out into the community, finding the best, most qualified, brightest candidates that we can find that are reflective of this wonderful community that we serve in law enforcement. The team is guided by a comprehensive plan, and suffice it to say, and I'll explain some of these pictures here in just a minute and on the upcoming slides, they go anywhere and everywhere, whether it be job fairs, whether it be community forums. They monitor our department website. The recruitment team has their own Facebook page. And as you're aware, we have 12 citizen advisory boards. At least 2 members of the team have attended each one of those advisory boards meetings. So you can see our plan is both organic and grassroots and then broader as we use social media. In the pictures up here in the upper left-hand corner, that was a picture that was taken on January 31st at Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church. Chief Yonner and the entire executive staff attended the 7:30 and the 11 o'clock services at Pilgrim Rest with our recruitment team, and that table was located just outside of the church in the lobby area. That event on the 31st led to a subsequent recruitment fair, a roundtable discussion that was coordinated by Ms. Marshall Franklin and Nikki Hicks from the police department, attended by Assistant Chief Markley and representatives of every rank within the organization just this past Saturday. The upper right-hand corner is the Women's Expo that was in October of 2015, the 10th and 11th.
And what you'll note there is you see officers in uniform, and then you see some of our communications staff. We recognize that there are many people that want to be part of the Phoenix PD family, but not necessarily sworn. So when we have these large expos, we co-locate our communications folks with our sworn folks, and we can provide information to everybody about opportunities in the department. And I'm particularly excited about the bottom photo. That's at the convention center. That was our last recruit test that was held on January 29th. There are 384 men and women that are in that room that took that recruit test. That is the largest single recruit test that we've had since we started hiring again. And I think that's a sign of the great work of our recruitment team and what's forthcoming. Now, to provide some further context in the way we do things, because when we get the candidates that come in, that show the interest, and they take the test, the next step is the physical agility assessment. So out of the folks that took this test, the 384, 315 passed. 224 showed up the very next day for the physical agility assessment, and 155 of them passed and were handed the background packet. So that starts the process, and I'll expound upon the whole process again a little further. But I also want to note, just because somebody didn't pass the written doesn't mean they don't have the opportunity to take it again. Just because somebody didn't pass the physical fitness doesn't mean they don't get to take it again. Quite the contrary. We have a system set up to make our candidates successful if they put forth the effort. This next picture in the upper left-hand corner, that was the superheroes, public safety superheroes night at Talking Stick Arena. And I'll say again, and not tongue-in-cheek, I defy you to tell me which one are the superheroes and which ones are the uniformed officers, because I think they're one and the same. And then to the right was a GAIN event where you see Sergeant Holland in the Garfield neighborhood. And the two below, there's Julio as part of our recruitment team, and also Officer Andrea Alexander and Chris McLeod at John F. Kennedy School for a Police Officer Appreciation Day. And you might ask yourself, well, I mean, these are little ones, you know, how does our recruitment effort impact the broader effort in the community? Well, they have older brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles, and they have nephews and parents. It's important that we engage the entire community in our effort. That's critically important to us. Let me take a moment to talk about our marketing campaign. We launched a very robust, aggressive marketing campaign in January of this year. Hopefully you've seen some of the billboards that we have out there. We have 15 different electronic billboards, which 8-second impressions through each cycle on these electronic billboards, which if you do the math, there's about 900 different impressions over the course of every day, which leads to 2 hours of Phoenix police officers every day being seen electronically around the city. Also, what you see right here is you have Recruit Officer Tufan here at the bus bench. We also have placards on our city buses, so we're using transit repeatedly throughout our effort, in addition to our website and other resources. If you haven't noticed the back of our patrol cars, we now have a new stencil on the back of our patrol cars as well that says "Now Recruiting," and we're driving people to the website as much as possible. And I would encourage you, if you haven't gone to the website recently, to please do so, and you can get to it just by going to the Phoenix Police page. Right on the upper left-hand corner, you'll see a link of our heroes again, and there's information on there, so we guide potential applicants through the entire process. So now what I want to do is I want to share some numbers with you, and I'll explain the slide that's before you today. Because of your support, the support of the mayor and the entire council and the citizens of Phoenix, we're authorized to hire 299 Phoenix police officers this fiscal year 15-16. So what you can see, and I'm very excited about this, that we've already hired 163. That's represented by 146 recruits and 17 lateral hires. As part of our overall strategy, we are encouraging qualified applicants from other agencies who have prior service to apply to the Phoenix Police Department. What that does for us is it gets talented individuals out on the street faster, because they're not required to attend the 20 weeks of the Arizona Law Enforcement Academy, and that just gets more experience out on the street. So you see that already hired number of 163, and I'll explain the 135 ALEA reservations number that says there. That's for the rest of the year. So the Arizona Law Enforcement Academy is home to 25 different user agencies. So we are but one user of the Arizona Law Enforcement Academy, so we reserve seats in every class. The classes are now starting every month. I talk about how exciting it is on the PD to have these young recruits going through the academy, but we have them in every class. There are 71 recruits that are down at the academy right now, and we have reservations for 135 more seats for the rest of the year. So if we hit our mark of 135 and you do the math, we come very, very close to getting to that 299. And that, again, speaks volumes, I believe, about our recruitment efforts and the fact that we are so diligent about recruiting from the city of Phoenix. Folks that understand our community, the unique needs of our community, et cetera. So I'll give you on the next 2 slides some of the demographic information so you can see the scope of our reach. Working in partnership with the city's Human Resources Department, we conducted 14 written exams last calendar year. 2,030 applicants participated in that process, and you can see the demographics as we move across the screen. Now, the next screen shows our hiring. So the bottom, which reflects 2,700 members of the Phoenix Police Department, shows our current composition. Some of the highlights: 76% white, 4% African American, 17% Hispanic, and 12.8% female. The top, a much smaller subset, the 163 that we've hired so far, but I believe it shows very clearly that we're moving in the right direction, shows that we're up slightly with our African American recruitment. There's always room for improvement to 5%. Where we've really moved the needle is our Hispanic recruitment, up from 17 to 30% of those hired, and our females from 12.8 up to 18%. So I think that shows that we are changing the composition of the Phoenix Police Department, I believe, in a very positive way, that our efforts are inclusive, that we are getting candidates through the door, and we'll continue to do so. That number that you saw, that picture on the first slide of the 384 candidates that were at the test just a couple of weeks ago, that's the model we want to follow going forward. Rather than have a number of small tests, work with HR to have one big test every month at the convention center. That concludes my presentation. I'll answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Councilmember Gallego?
So I understand that we track how people found the process to apply. What is our best source of applicants?
Quite frankly, I think our social media presence is probably the best in terms of volume, but we have found what I believe is much more effective is that one-on-one communication with our recruitment team. We have a frequently asked questions section on the website, and that's certainly driving people there. Also, American Police Beat magazine, an electronic magazine, just this week, the top banner on the front of that magazine is Phoenix PD. So it shows our impressions throughout the country. So when we talk about mass impressions, much more so through our social media presence. But in terms of those one-on-one engagements, that's how I think that we're swaying those that maybe were considering a career in law enforcement, but maybe weren't completely sold into giving us a chance, recognizing that this is an incredible opportunity to serve.
And I would guess among the successful applicants, probably the best source is referrals from existing police officers. Is that?
That is certainly one source. There are a number of referrals, and when I talk about these 3 members of the recruitment team here that I worked with out in the Maryville Estrella Mountain Precinct, they know a lot of young people, and I'm not restricting it to young people, but a lot of young people that they can engage with to move down the right path. So there is a lot of that organic dialogue that's occurring.
Great. And how about language skills? We have a diverse city where people speak many languages, Spanish obviously being the second most common, but many others. Do we track whether we're hiring people who come in with language skills?
We do, and in fact, every Tuesday, the team down in Employment Services, we have a roundtable discussion, and we'll be, I believe it'll be in the April Academy class, we'll be bringing a gentleman on board that is a sign language certified instructor, so an interpreter. That's exciting for us as well.
That's fabulous, because when you're in a stressful situation, if the officer can communicate with you without a translator, I think that is something that improves public safety in the community. So
it's very helpful.
Great news. About Spanish speakers, do we track that, or?
We do.
Great.
I have a couple comments. So we've hired about 163 new officers out of the, 2,030 applicants?
Yes.
That's about an 8% margin. Have we thought of other ways of recruiting? I know that we're focusing within the state of Arizona. Have we thought about maybe expanding that recruitment to other states? I know that the chief was saying that we'd really like to focus on individuals from our state that understands the culture and our neighborhoods and all that. but I'm seeing that we're falling behind on our recruitment and that there's such a need out there in the community to have more police officers out on the streets. Do we have a plan on recruiting outside of the state of Arizona?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the council, we are doing that. I mentioned the American Police Beat magazine is just one venue, and when we look at our lateral hires, we're seeing them from all over. We're seeing them from the Midwest, from California, you name it, they're coming. So we've been very measured, I will say, in the way we have opened up recruitment throughout the country, but I would imagine that in the near future, you'll see that expanded somewhat so we can strike a balance between those folks that understand the Phoenix community and those that maybe have some other skill sets, whether they be language, whether they be experience, whatever the case may be from elsewhere. We want to be inclusive. Certainly we want to reach our numbers. We want to make sure we do so by hiring the best and the brightest.
And have we looked at career days in universities throughout the country? Because I know when I was going to ASU that we had a career day where people from all over the United States would come in and try to recruit the best of the best at ASU for their companies and their organizations. Are we doing that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we're doing that now right in the state of Arizona. And I will tell you, one of the tests that we administered last year was done in Yuma, and quite specifically because of the Marine Air Corps station that's down there in Yuma, so we could recruit some of our veterans potentially. Each member of the recruitment team has a unique skill set, so some are more focused because they have military experience on the military recruitment or at our institutions of higher learning. Suffice to say, we are leaving no stone unturned.
Already, any other questions? Well, this was for information and an update. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And next is an update on our fire. All yours, Captain.
Good morning, Chairman Nowakowski, subcommittee members. My name is Danny Seville. I'm an Assistant Chief of the Phoenix Fire Department, and I am assigned to the Human Resources Division. And within my roles and responsibilities comes firefighter recruitment at the entry level to recruitment, testing, and selection. In the audience, I'd like to acknowledge some of our team members. We have Division Chief Tim Gamage, who is newly assigned to our Human Resources Section 2, and Tim will be leading the charge on our recruitment, testing, selection for not only firefighter recruit, but also for promotional processes. In the back row, I will definitely want to acknowledge some of our female firefighters that are out actively mentoring and recruiting female firefighter recruit candidates. We have Division Chief Lisa Jones, Captain Riddle Bigler, Captain Joellen Caldwell, and Deputy Chief Shelley Jameson. To these women, I will speak about it in my presentation, but the work that they are doing with some of our female candidates is astounding. It is a very robust program that they are working on right now. I will let you know that they volunteer their time other than their daily jobs and their time away from their families too, so I'll be able to speak on that too. So I'm very pleased to be able to present to you today on our presentation on current firefighter recruit. I really want to go over our current firefighter recruit hiring, future plan recruitment, testing and hiring, overview of our Phoenix Fire Department demographics, where we're at with our current sworn members, and then also our moving forward for future firefighter recruitment strategies and practices. I am pleased to announce that we are in the current of a hiring process right now. Last September, we conducted our annual firefighter recruit test. That was in September of 2015. I will let you know from that pool of candidates, we had 2,477 candidates apply for firefighter recruit. Out of that, we had 1,621 participate in the written test. You may ask why we went from 2,400 down to 1,600. Some of those members may have looked at the minimum qualifications that they maybe didn't meet. Maybe they didn't have the emergency medical technician certificate, and maybe they had not acquired the candidate physical ability test, which they do on their own as part of the requirements. Maybe they just didn't meet some of the other qualifications too. But we did end up testing 1,621 members in the written test. We were able to fill the large assembly room at the Phoenix Convention Center too, and it was a sight to see that if you walk out there on testing day, you had lines wrapped around Phoenix Convention Center because this is a very competitive process. Out of those 1,621, We were able to, 1,089 did pass the test. So from that, working with City HR, we do have a certified list that we can currently hire off of. To date, I will let you know that for the academy classes that we have just graduated in 2015, and the one that is currently in the academy for class 16-1, we call it, we have invited approximately 450 candidates to interview for the position of firefighter recruit. So some of the past hiring that we've done in 2014, we started to see some of the hiring come along. I know through city council action and through the leadership of city management, we were able to hire one class that was city funded that enabled us to put in an ambulance into service, and then also too we were able to acquire some of the SAFER grants too. And I know Chairman Nowakowski, you're very much involved with that with us in that process. In 2015 is where we really started to see a kickoff of our hiring. Last year in 2015 alone, we did hire 119 firefighter recruits. That was over the classes that we had. This is the 12-week academies that we conduct down at our training academy. So we were able to pass along and put into the field 119 firefighters. Currently, we do have a class in the academy that is class 16-1. They're in about their 5th week of training. It is a 12-week academy training regimen. And like I said, hearing and meeting with the director of training there, Deputy Chief Chris Stewart, they're learning the skills that they need to go out there and hit the streets and at the end of the 12 weeks and make a difference in our community. As we speak, we are in our final selection interview boards for an academy class starting in April. That will be a class of about 26 candidates we're looking at, and we're in the final selection process of that. So we're looking forward to bringing in those new firefighters here in the middle of April. To target for this year, for 2015, we are looking at having not only the class 16-1, the selection that we're going through with the current class that we're hiring for, but then also too by the end of this year, we would like to see a total of 75. We are planning to 75 recruits to be completed with training by the end of this year. So moving forward in the future, working with City HR, like I said, we do have an annual test. Most promotional entry-level tests for the City of Phoenix with City HR, they are on an annual basis too. So we do hold an annual testing process. We are looking at a written test coming up, and leading up to that written test, we will work with our recruitment team and our HR section to make sure that we are going out and reaching those pool of candidates out there, because we do plan for a written test in November 2016. Once we do get that certified list in 2016, kind of like we did in 2015, we will start the hiring process for future classes in 2017. So moving forward for 2017, we were looking at 32 firefighter recruits. That number may fluctuate depending if somebody is not successful in a prior academy class, then we kind of adjust the numbers so we can make sure that we are meeting our numbers. I know in past city council sessions, city council has, along with budget and research and city management, we've looked at the magic number of 1615 to sustain our staffing levels to be able to meet the needs of all of our stations and our areas. So we're looking at 1615 to be able to sustain that. We should probably reach that number by the end of 2016. With the rest of the classes that we're hiring this year. 2018 and 2019, respectively, we're probably looking at about maybe 34 firefighters per year, and that's to keep track with our attrition rates. We do have known retirements. I know all of you know about our drop program. So we are able to track out and kind of forecast how many members will be leaving our ranks over the next couple of years. Annually, if you look at people that leave unannounced, whether it be for various reasons, personal reasons, or going on to another career, those people who are not in the drop, we average about maybe 4 members a year that leave the department unannounced. And so that is, yes, ma'am, that is very few, Councilwoman Williams. I really want to give you an update on our current female fire department sworn demographics. I know after we had the equal pay ordinance last year, we were challenged by city council, city management to really look at our numbers too. Right now, we have currently within our ranks, we're about 4.9% female sworn, and that's our total sworn. That's from all ranks, from our fire chief down to our newest firefighter recruit in the academy. I did look ahead at a historical perspective of it. I wanted to look where we were at 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So I went back to about 2002, 2000, and historically, we have been around 4.9, 4.7. We've fluctuated to. I will let you know that that is something that we're going to continue to work on. That is our goal. That is a commitment from the fire chief down through all of the ranks of our firefighters. That it is important that we go out there and we look for those qualified, very talented, self-motivated, physically capable recruits, whether they be male or female, that come into our ranks. In comparison to the national average female firefighters in the fire service is 3.7%. We know this is not a very traditional female job, but it is our commitment to keep looking for those candidates, and which is why I really wanted to acknowledge our team in the back, because that's what they're doing on an everyday basis. I will let you know that with these past couple of classes that we have hired, we've hired 9 female recruits in these past classes. But in comparison, as far as the net of retirements, we have lost 5 other females in the last fiscal year. That's through retirements and other reasons too. So as we hire, we're also losing some of our more senior female firefighters too. We continue to work with city HR. After the equal pay ordinance, I was able to sit down with the city HR Employment Services. Cindy Bezery was very engaged with us to make sure that we are reaching out to those organizations that empower women to enter the workforce, especially those non-traditional jobs that we talk about, public safety, fire, and the like. Moving on to speak about some of the minority demographics, we have seen an upkick in our African American hiring. Where in 2015, we're about 6.4% African American total sworn, that's male and female. Now we're about 7.3%. Hispanic, we have maintained about a 17.3%, but over the years, we have come up from 12% over to 16%. But like I said, we are now at about 17.3% of what I've been able to track through our ethnicity and gender reports from the city HR. Some of the other demographics, American Indian and Asian, we're hovering about 1%, and that's on an annual basis. We see those numbers for those demographics as well. So to kind of continue, it is our goal to recruit highly motivated, physically capable, self-disciplined candidates. Kind of like Chief Kurtenbach said, we feel it is very important for us to be able to reflect the community that we serve. These are the communities that we work, live, and play in, that we worship in, that we are engaged in. We feel it is very important that the best way to serve those citizens and those residents of Phoenix is that we reflect that in our sworn firefighters. Some of our recruitment outreach that we've taken on, like I said, ever since the equal pay ordinance, with our recruitment team, was that we've reached out to all the major universities. Arizona State University, University of Arizona, NAU, GCU. We really wanted to reach out and talk to those student athletes. We understand that you have to have not only the physical capacity to do this job, but you also have to have the intelligence and the mental capability and capacity to do this job. Although this is still a very blue-collar job, you have to go out there and you have to extend hose lines and get your hands dirty and get into an environment where we're not very accustomed to in the layperson's world. This is a very blue-collar job, but we are moving into the 21st century. Technology is always changing. Emergency medical services are always changing, and techniques too. So we want to make sure that we're looking at well-rounded candidates. So I will let you know that after our outreach to those major universities, I had former athletes, All-Americans calling me, softball players from U of A, volleyball players from GCU calling us, say, hey, I want to be a Phoenix firefighter. We sent them to our website, kind of like Chief Kurtenbach talked about. We sent them to our social media websites, which I'll also discuss too. So we're starting to see more and more people across the nation. I mean, athletes who are engaged out in different associations through alumni associations out on the East Coast were also contacting us. We are also reached out to the Maricopa County Community Colleges. At those institutions, they have fire science programs, emergency medical technician programs, firefighter 1 and 2 programs too. So our recruitment team, we go out there and we meet with those folks. We also invite them into our institution too as well. Last year, at the leadership of Chief Jamison, we had a firefighter career day. We invited over 200 applicants, first-time applicants, to come down to the academy. We used on-duty resources at no cost to the city, and we had those candidates go through an orientation. What is it like of the day of a firefighter? What does a 12-week academy look like? We also talked about minimum qualifications. And then at the end of the day, we introduced them to some of our affinity groups, which are volunteer firefighter groups who are sworn firefighters. And I'll get into that to my presentation too, so they can start going down to the mentorship process too, because that is where we feel we get our best bang for the buck, is through our mentorship programs. Also too, we are engaged in the high schools. We have a very great relationship too with Franklin High School. Principal Cabrera there has reached out to us through our Valley Hispanic Bomberos and also through our firefighter recruitment team. So we're very engaged with Principal Cabrera at Franklin High School. Moon Valley High School has a fire science program that many of the instructors at that Moon Valley fire program there are Phoenix firefighters. And they're engaged. They're role models every day. They talk to the students every day about becoming firefighters in the future. So those are just examples of what we do. Chief Jamison is also leading the effort to bring in some of the Girl Scouts. What we are looking at here coming up in 2016 is we are going to have a one-day camp for Girl Scouts. We're going to bring them down to the Fire Academy. We're going to start reaching out past the junior high level into the grade school level and talk about, hey, you do have a future as a firefighter. It doesn't mean that you have to be the biggest, strongest, fastest person out there. But if you have those talents and those skills, and we recognize those early on, think about this job in the future. So we're looking forward to Camp Inspire with Chief Jamison too, with the Girl Scouts. On the veteran side, I know this means a lot to you, Councilwoman Gallego. On the veteran side, we are very much engaged with our veterans. We have reached out to Veteran Public Affairs. We have also we had a very friendly competition with Phoenix PD and their recruitment team during Marine Week. When we had the Marines back here in September, our recruitment team was out there on the streets of Phoenix working and passing out pamphlets and information out to the Marines out there walking the street and said, hey, after you're done with your commitment by serving our country, think about a job with the Phoenix Fire Department and the fire service, and we will provide you the path so you can be successful in that too.
We'd like to be kept updated on who wins that competition. I take it if it's in the fire presentation and not Chief Kurtenbach,
It depends who you ask too.
Okay.
So like I said, it was a very friendly competition with the PD recruitment team as well. I did speak about the career day at our Phoenix Fire Department Training Academy, and we will plan on having another one too as we move towards the next written process too as well. Kind of like Chief Kurtenbach talked about, our social media campaign is very robust. We have our Phoenix Fire Department Facebook page. I got the latest numbers. During our recruitment period, our Facebook page was shared 8,020 times. 225 times it was liked, and this is a new term for me. I'm not a Facebooker, but this is new terms for me. But this is something that we were very proud of. We know to reach the millennials, social media is something that we need to reach out to. We use Twitter. Twitter was another way that we can keep sharing our website, keep sharing our recruitment link, and then also to YouTube. Through the work of Chief Jamison and her production staff, we have recruitment videos on YouTube, and we also have a production on there called Phoenix Fire Department Fireline, and it goes over a 12-week academy. So if you're wondering what it's like to be a firefighter recruit for 12 weeks, you can go to that YouTube link and you can look it up, and it just walks you through all the steps and process too. So very informative, very informative. We will continue to work through our social media campaign and just kind of to continue to reach out to all those potential candidates. I mentioned it earlier in my presentation, and those are our Phoenix Fire Department affinity groups. Our affinity groups are sworn firefighters. They also, too, on their days off, they volunteer on a regular basis in their communities. They do community involvement, drowning prevention, car seat awareness, bike rodeos, many of the things that you see Phoenix firefighters do on a community education aspect, but they do it voluntarily. Biggest cornerstone of those groups is mentorship. They go out and they actively recruit through a very informal process. They reach out to the communities. They go to the churches. They are in the schools. They are out there in the communities, and they touch those potential candidates, and they bring them into the fold. They see certain skills and talents, and then they bring them in. They invite them to the fire stations. Here's what it's going to take to be a firefighter. They set them on a career path as far as certifications and qualifications too. We have the J.W. Robinson Society. It was the United Black Firefighters Association. They are very much engaged in recruitment. The Valley Hispanic Bomberos, and I know Chairman Nowakowski, you've been very much involved with that organization. You talked about a couple of weeks back how they helped out one of our past veterans, with some of the housing needs. That's one of their very cornerstones of the Valley Hispanic Bomberos is mentorship as well. Fire Vet Society, Phoenix Fire Vet Society. These are current Phoenix firefighters who are veterans. So they understand the needs of veterans who are transitioning from military life to trying to enter the current job market today, and all the struggles and navigating through those waters as they go from military to civilian life. So this is also an affinity group that is very engaged with us too as well. United Phoenix Emerald Society too, and also to our Phoenix Fire Cadet Program. These are volunteers. These are teenagers anywhere from the age of 16 up to 25 years old who volunteer for us. You may have seen if you came down to our Emergency Operations Center during Super Bowl or during college football playoffs. These were the young men and women wearing the gray shirts that were doing the odds and ends jobs, moving equipment and everything else too. They aspire to be Phoenix firefighters down the road too. So that's another group for us to tap into too. And kind of you asked the question, Councilwoman Gallego, as what's PD's number one referral service? I will say that over and above, our most bang for the buck are our firefighters out there in the communities. We have 1,600 strong out there right now. They are engaged in their neighborhoods, faith-based organizations. They are coaches, Little League, Pop Warner, and many times parents and friends come to them and say, hey, my son wants to be a firefighter. My daughter wants to be a firefighter. Can you please show them the way? You will see this, and like I said, it is probably hard to measure how many potential candidates go to our stations on an everyday basis. But it is just amazing to see a young, bright-eyed candidate on a fire truck wondering what the job is about and inspiring them to achieve that position too. So that our word of mouth and our informal recruitment through our firefighters is probably our number one outreach to the community too as well. So in conclusion, the recruitment of qualified, diverse candidates, it will remain the focus of the fire chief down through all the ranks. I will let you know that our fire chief, along with myself and our operations chief, who is now retired, we met with all of our captains last year in one-on-one meetings with our captains. Recruitment and bringing in qualified candidates was one of the top agenda items on our meetings too. Our captains are engaged, our crews are engaged, and like I said, it is a commitment from the top down through our ranks that we continue to work forward to this. Yes, we do have work to do, especially on the female front. We are very glad to see we are ahead of the National Fire Service too, but there is work to be done, and we are committed to do that too as well. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions from my colleagues?
Very impressive.
I think you already anticipated all of our questions and answered them.
I had a little hint. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, I have some questions. You're on the move with recruiting females, but I noticed that probably about 38%, 40% of the population in the city of Phoenix happen to be Hispanic, and we're down to about 17.3% Hispanic recruitments. Is there a special plan or a recruitment plan to recruit Hispanics and especially Spanish speakers?
We do track Spanish speakers. We're very much engaged with that. We do have a Spanish immersion program that once our firefighters come on the job, even if you are not Hispanic or Latino and you want to learn the skills of speaking Spanish, we train you. We put you in a fire station for 3 months and we go through Spanish training. And then after that, you are qualified for linguistic pay. Coming into the door, yes, we do look at, we are very much engaged because we do know that according to the census polls, we're about 30% for the city of Phoenix, and we're at 17% for our hiring too. So yes, through our recruitment team, through social media too. We also have one of our PIOs, Ardell DeLise, Captain Ardell DeLise. She is a Spanish speaker and she's reaching out to the media. She's reaching out through social media too for Spanish speaking candidates too as well too. So we're going to be actively engaged with that too as well.
I know that we asked for a waiver for our SAFER program. Can you give us an update on that? Because we dropped our level of firefighters. So that was one of the stipulations in that grant, that we keep the same level of employees or firefighters. And we just asked for a waiver to allow us to recruit extra firefighters to be at that level, so we wouldn't lose
Yes,
that
I
program.
believe with our SAFER program, the SAFER grant that you're referring to, is that right now we are at sustainment level. Is that there is another SAFER grant application coming up, and I believe in May will be the application period for that too. We will have to look at our current numbers, where we're at with city-funded positions too, and what we would qualify from grant-funded positions too. But if there is an opportunity for us to pursue SAFER grant funding too, we work closely very much with Budget and Research and Deputy Chief Ken Leake, who is our fiscal section head as well too. So we will continue to monitor that too to see if we actually qualify for that, because I understand that there are certain numbers that we have to be able to meet to be qualified for that.
And Chief, I just want to thank you for everything you do out there in the community. I met you many, many years ago when I was working at the Diocese of Phoenix, and you were one of the leaderships in the Valley Hispanic Bomberos, and the mentorship programs, the recruitment programs that the Hispanic Valley Bomberos have is incredible, and what you do for the community. At one time, we were probably known for the most drownings in the country, and individuals like yourselves and organizations like the Valley Bomberos and our Assistant Chief Jamerson working very hard, and Sonia to make sure to educate people, especially in the Maryville area.
Very much so.
I just really want to thank you for helping educate people and at the same time saving lives. So those programs do work. Those Infinity groups that we have with the firefighters do really help out the community and mentor people and help get some best recruits that are out there. So thank you for
Thank you. It's our
your
pleasure.
leadership also.
Thank you.
With that, I think we're in our item number 10. Thank you, Chief. So we're on the public safety budget update. Show us the money.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. My name is Jill Sly. I work for the Phoenix Police Department, and I will give you an overview of our budget through the end of December. Through the end of December, we are at 52% spent. We should be at 50%, but most of it is attributed to overtime that Chief Yonner discussed at the last subcommittee. Our month-to-month comparison for December, we're 5% higher than last year, but and it's still attributed to the overtime issues that we're having right now.
Is that what drove the differential in October, the 12% variance in October, was just a lot of overtime in particular that month?
Yes, plus I believe October we got paid for 3 pay periods during that month also.
Thank you.
And then again, our top 10 expenditures continue to be personal service items. As you can see, our overtime is higher than last year at this time, but a lot of it's due to the minimum staffing issues we're having out in patrol. And then our equipment management charges are higher also because of the aging fleet that we have. And then finally, our revenues collected. Court awards is the most we've collected through the end of December. Last year's was higher than this fiscal year due to the additional funding we added for the RMS project. And then the other large difference is for our IGAs and our task force, and that is attributed to Southwest Border Alliance, the additional funds that we received last fiscal year. And with that, if there are no more questions, I will turn it over to Fire.
Could you talk about the jail services change?
The jail services, the reason it's higher this year is because I have 5 months of actuals in there compared to 4 months last fiscal year.
Great, and insurance premium, any changes we made that drove the?
It's just based on how many claims that we have out there and how many people are on industrial in our department.
But we're trying to manage safety as much as possible.
Yes, we are doing that. Actually, our safety unit takes a look at those industrial claims, and then they include in our weekly newsletter that we send out to all of our employees some safety tips of what they see is happening based on the industrial claims they reviewed.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. My name is Patricia Lucero, and I'm here to present the budget on behalf of the municipal court. At the end of December 2015, 6 months into the budget, we are about 40% of the court expenses has been used. So we are at 1.34 under budget for expenditures through December. Our monthly expenditures are at just about under 5% below from same time last year. So we are a little bit under of where we were. Our next slide on our expenditures. Our top 10 expenditures again remain pretty much the same, with our top 3 being salaries, pension, and then the health insurance, which are the top leading 3. So those are our expenditures. And finally, on our revenues collected, we are at about, total revenue collected is at about 10% under what was collected from same time last year. So we are just slightly under where we were same time last year in collecting. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Absolutely.
It seems like recently we approved that the court has a new program to recover.
Correct. The Compliance
Has that-
Assistance Program?
Yeah, has that begun, and have you seen any response?
Yes, the Compliance Assistance Program began on January 25th. And since that, we have seen 877 people come into the court to participate in the program. So we are gradually picking up speed. And next month, we should be able to reflect in the budget update what kind of revenue we're collecting from that process.
You know how many letters you sent out?
How many letters we've sent out? No, we in our financial review process motion, we do about 200 letters a month, but that has drastically changed because we have heard from our customers that a lot of it is a word of mouth, family and friends, and so that's how customers are coming into the court, and that's kind of minimized those letters having come into the court. You're welcome.
We're looking forward to next month's update.
Yes,
We've
the
heard-
court is very excited about the program.
We've heard people have paid off their entire fine, even not taking advantage of compliance assistance. that they-
Exactly. We've had some customers who just want to get on the payment plan program and then just be in compliance with the court, and we've had others who have just paid off their entire fine. So it's a great program, and it is an opportunity with accountability for the customers of the court.
Got to meet a few of the people who got their driver's license back, some after
Yes.
many years. It's
Yes, it's very exciting to hear the stories. Thank you.
So the biggest savings is really salaries, right?
Correct. And that is, we do have quite a bit of vacancies still in the court. So with the filings down and with being able to do the recruitment and retaining staff who are leaving to other jurisdictions or other careers and promotional opportunities, that is where our biggest savings is with the salaries due to the vacancies.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have fire next.
Good morning, Chairman Nowakowski and members of the committee. I'm Ken Lake. I'm here to present the fire department's budget. So at 50% of the year, you can see we're tracking just slightly under the budget, which is good for us as we head towards the home stretch. So in our expenditures, you see that we're slightly up, and much like PD, we experienced a October that was significantly higher due to payroll and some other procurement issues that came through. But overall, we're tracking very similar to what we anticipated. The top 10 expenditures are again very much the same as my colleagues here, with salaries, pensions, and those employee-driven costs being the highest of all of them. In our constant staffing, which is our overtime to keep our unit staffed, we're just slightly under last year's comparison, which is a good news for us. We think we attributed some of this to catching up, much like Chief Seville had talked about in the hiring plan. It has somewhat of a relationship to how we staff our trucks. But on down the line, everything seems very much the same, other than equipment management charges are a little higher. And that's pretty much it as far as anomalies in that. In revenues, I would have to point out that the ambulance transports are continuing to perform very well for us. We're about $2.1 million over what our projected goals were. A lot of this has to do with the changes in state health care, but also our ambulance billing staff is up to full speed, and we're doing a really good job at collecting revenue there. And that's about all we have. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Any questions? And just for those individuals watching, in the month of December, we had a 3 pay period. That means that there was 3 checks that were allocated in that month. So out of the 52 weeks, there's some months that have 3 pay periods, and so the budget's not adjusted for those. But in the long run, the annual, it will be adjusted. So there might be a couple months that you'll see a 3rd pay period, and this happens to be one of those. So thank you all for the report. With that, we're on the future agenda items.
Mr. Chairman, certainly we know we're doing the CPTI next month, but we're also prepared, if you want to have it on the agenda, to talk about jail alternatives. Council Member Gallego had wanted us to look at that. We have looked at it. We'll be able to give some a more cogent response to that as an alternative next month if you want to have it there.
That sounds great. Any other future agenda items? Councilmember Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We set up that booking area for the police, and if I recall, we also had judges linked in via video. How is that working? How many people have gone through? Could we get a report on that? If that's successful and from both sides? And then how many proceed on to jail or are released from there?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gallego?
We are always looking at the revenue side as well, and towing and is something that I think we would love to see. And then in my original motion at last month, we talked about getting metal theft update in March as well. Unquestionably, though, Community Police Trust Initiative is my top priority for March, and I think the communities as well. So,
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gallego, I know we recently were dealing with the next round of contract renewals for towing. Remember, we were talking about that within the last few weeks. So the metal theft, we'll be ready to talk about that too.
Thank you.
I know that Councilmember Williams, and I know all of us are really feel that these body cameras are very important. Maybe we can get an update in the future, maybe not in March, but in the near future on what that cost would be if we actually allocated body cameras to all of our police officers within the 3 years. Well, how would that affect our bottom line, and what would we have to be budgeting for that?
Yes, sir. You know, I can say to you, the camera part's the easiest part of it.
Right, the compliance.
It's the storage part, the redaction part, the staff you have to hire to manage the open records request. That's really where the expense lies. But we have been looking at that, and we will be prepared to talk about it whenever you want to put it on.
And also the new ordinances that we have to, just to comply to public requests and privacies and all that kind.
Right,
So
the
if we-
policy part.
So I'd like to see if we can bring that to this subcommittee and then ask the mayor to actually put it on as a policy, because I believe it affects all of our districts, and it's something that I believe all my colleagues would like to be a part of this conversation.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other? With that, I'd like to adjourn this meeting. Thank you.